Hey guys, I'm sorry I can't see your faces, but I'm glad you're here. And we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so thinking, so be prepared. Um, I hope to change your world a bit. I know that many people say that on their talks, but what I would try to do would be to cast a bit of a shadow of a doubt, and I hope you leave this presentation with exactly that. So caution and stop listening if you want the world to stay the same. And when it comes to organization of this talk, if you have any questions, please type them on the chat, and the support team would pass them on to me. And I would be also asking you a lot of questions and giving you different exercises. So if you want to, of course, you don't have to, but if you want to, take a piece of paper and a pen and write down the answers just for yourselves to see how it goes and how cognitively developed you are. All right, so we'll start with a simple thing, and the simple thing is a question. So are these two arrows the same length? Just a second to think. The answer is that they're not, and you might have seen this picture before, and also you must have suspected that they aren't the same length, right? Because it's a presentation about your brain and cognitive pitfalls. But I'm sure you still can't believe your eyes, because this is an illusion. This is called Müller-Lyer illusion, and it was created in 1889 by a German sociologist. And the direction of the arrows in this picture makes it hard for us to understand that the lines are the same, because the latter line appears to be longer than the former one. In fact, they're exactly the same. So it is a visual illusion, and it is an introduction to what I want to unpack with you today, which would be other type of illusions, mental illusions. And we can basically divide them into three categories. And sorry, I have a horrible sore throat, so I would be making short breaks. So we can divide these illusions, mental illusions, into three basic categories. And all three of them are related to cognitivism, which is a science of thinking, the science for understanding the mind. And these three are cognitive biases, fallacies, and heuristics. A cognitive bias is a systemic error in your thinking. So if you go to a shop and you see a price tag, and the price tag says $1.99, let's say, and then you see the same thing with a tag $2. Your brain automatically thinks that $1.99 is a bargain, but it's not, of course. Logical fallacy is a mistake in reasoning. So let's imagine you go to a restaurant, you buy yourself a whole plate of food, you eat it, but at one point you're full and you paid for it, right? So a natural thing to do would be to think, okay, I have to finish it, which is a mistake of reasoning because of course you don't have to. Heuristic is a mental shortcut. It's a mental shortcut to solve a more complex problem. So let's say you're going on a trip and you want to book a hotel, you go to TripAdvisor to check the rating, you see that hotel has 5 stars, and then you see that there have been, let's say, 100 reviews. And then you think, okay, these 100 people can't be wrong, right? Which is a shortcut. The problem is much more complex, and these 100 people can be wrong. Anyways, I would be talking about these two first categories, so biases and fallacies. And generally, there are at least 15 of them that have been researched thoroughly, but there are hundreds of them, I think. And the research of cognitivism is, it has been a science for the last, I would say, maybe 10 years or so, maybe 15. So there's still a lot to find out. But what is hard here, I mean, what is hard to maybe understand is that biases form basically everything. They form our judgments, they form our political views, how we see other people, how we make decisions, how we remember, if we are prone to advertisement, how we shop, and even more. So they're everywhere because these are our brain's attempts to simplify reality. Our brains are doing that to think faster and to make thinking easier, which is super hard in the age of information overload, by the way. Why am I talking about it? This is a good question, especially for an IT conference. And I'm thinking about it because if you think yourselves how distorted your perception is, how your mind distorts reality, and that the world is not what you think it is, then all planning and estimations and leadership and talking to people might be a bit different if you remember. If you remember that, and if you're aware that your brain is playing tricks on you. So talking about cognitive biases and cognitive sciences, actually, there is one person that connects cognitive science and economy, and his name is Daniel Kahneman. He's a guru of economics and cognitivism. He's a Nobel Prize laureate and pioneer of the research on how we think. And he coined two terms that would be useful for our presentation today. The first term is system 1, the other is system 2. These are two paths of our thinking. System 1 is fast, is automatic, you don't feel, you control it. It is constantly monitoring what is going around you. System 2 needs focus. It is that path that your brain uses to reason and to analyze, and it's slower than system 1. And to show you a few examples, what are this guy's emotions? And how much is 17 times 24? The first one is system 1, because you look at it and you constantly know that this guy is angry. And the equation here is system 2, because to even attempt counting it, you have to really focus. You have to divide it into steps, and your whole body has to focus to do the maths here. Other examples of systems 1 and 2 are, when I say capital of France, you think Paris. When I say 2 plus 2, you think 4. That's system 1. When you're listening to me and you're probably judging if what I'm telling is true, this is system 2. Also, when I say pigs can fly, this would be system 2 working and trying to understand if that's possible or not. These two systems cooperate constantly with each other, and they divide tasks. So everything that happens around you, every information that you get is quantified and is divided between two systems. The problem is that both system 1 and system 2 are biased. So they're prone to mistakes, like the one with arrows. And I will tell you about these mistakes a bit more so that you can see them in your own thinking. A story now. This is Carol. And Carol is a designer, UI designer. Let's say you meet her at a conference and you talk, and she is nice and she is pretty, and the topic of a design system that you're talking about is quite interesting to you. And then you come back to work. And during a conversation at work, you are looking for somebody who would help you design an application, an app that would be pro bono. So for free would be an app for a shelter. And somebody mentions Carol. Do you think Carol would be a good person to create this application? And I think you think she would be a good person. Or actually, if you were in this situation, you would have thought that. But the question here is, Carol is nice, right? But what do you know about her generosity? So what do you know about her tendencies to help people for free? Is there a reason to think that a person that is nice and pretty, or pretty, is also generous and helpful? This sort of problem, I would say, this sort of bias in thinking is called halo effect. It is a type of cognitive bias in which a single trait can carry over to how you see other aspects of a person's personality, both good and bad. It was coined by Edward Thorndike, and it is about, I'll put it differently. What happens here is that you have two pieces of information. Carol is good looking and she is also nice, but you have no data to answer the question if she would be a good person to make an app for free. So your brain has no data, and it makes this simplification and a connection between good looking and generous. And this is halo effect. Now let's move on. This was easy. I will show you something harder. So this little thingy that you can see in the slide, that's a date picker. It was designed by IBM designers. And it's this little thing that helps you to choose a date in different sorts of apps or websites or whatever. And to develop it, you can use open source code or libraries to make it faster and to cut on time and to limit effort, which a normal person would do. But a real life story. I had this project, and on my team I had this guy, let's call him Peter. He was a senior developer with loads of experience, like 10 years of experience and a big brain and quite good estimation skills. And guess what? He even made a similar date picker some time ago. And we're doing this project and we have to create a custom made date picker. So we have designs, we also have quite clear requirements. So we move to estimation, how much time it would take to code it and to test it. And Peter takes some time to think it through and to analyze it, etc. And he says it would take 4 weeks. And I'm like, whoa, that's 20 man days, right? That's a lot of cash and a lot of time and a lot of effort. But then, okay, it is custom made. So I talk to the client agrees, and it's fine. So we take 2 sprints. Excuse me, we take 2 sprints to develop the date picker. But do you know how long it took actually when we finished? It turned out it took 4 months, not 4 weeks. So surprise, surprise. That's not a surprising thing in IT, but still 4 weeks is quite long. And what happened here? What happened is what is called planning fallacy. So people have a tendency to underestimate the time it would take to complete a future task, even if actually they have knowledge about similar tasks in the past. And what happens underneath in your brain when planning fallacy happens or takes place is a couple of things. So the first thing is that human beings, believe it or not, are optimists. So we're very often too optimistic and we don't know what we don't know. This is a super smart, super short phrase, but actually conveys a lot of meaning. So you cannot really foresee all the obstacles and all the information and everything that would happen on the way between your start and your end of the project or of a task or actually anything you do. So a natural thing to do is to be optimistic. The second thing is that when you complete make a task, you always look from the inside of it, so as to say. So often a problem is that you don't compare this task to other similar ones. So you don't compare cases and you really don't have data to use. Another thing is, actually that we don't use that much data. But an interesting thing here, and that's another bias, is that we as humans often take credit for tasks that went well, but we blame delays on outside influences. So when something doesn't go the way you want, you have all sorts of excuses. So like the requirements were unclear, or it was bad weather, I didn't feel very well, it was longer than I thought, etc., etc., etc. So 3 things go into play when planning fallacy happens. Another real-life example, sorry. Development here and development there. What you can see in the picture is the building of the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. They started building it in 1997 and they finished in 2004. The first estimated cost of this building was £40 million. After 2 years, it was 109. In 2001, they created a final estimation, and it was 241. Remember, the first estimation was 40, right? In 2001, it was 241. And they finished in 2004 with a total cost of 431 million pounds, which is like 2 billion zloty. I don't know if that's a lot or not for a building, but still. The idea here is that they were totally unable to estimate what would happen and how big the cost would be. And I guess that each of you who bought a house or a flat or redecorated anything knows that it's an often case, right? You know what I'm talking about. So planning fallacy is quite expensive. Right. So we've already covered halo effect and we covered planning fallacy. I want to cover one more thing with you. So I will show you now a quick story. Please read it, and I will also read it out loud, so you don't have to. And then I would ask you to do something. And the story is like that. You paid 400 zloty for a conference ticket. And let's say it's not an online conference. The venue is 45 minutes drive from your home. On the day of the conference, there is a thunderstorm, hail, and horrible, horrible traffic. So let's say this happens. The question is, would you go or not? And now, second situation. It is actually the same, but the context is a bit different. You got the ticket for free, so you didn't pay 400 zloty for a ticket. Would you go or not? I guess you already have the answer. So in this situation, most people wouldn't go. So if you haven't paid, you wouldn't feel that much obliged to go to the conference when the weather is bad and it's an effort to go. You would go if you paid, because otherwise you would feel this is a waste of investment, a waste of initial investment that you made. You may feel that you need to follow up on a decision that you made, or you may feel that you're like generally obliged to go. And what is happening here, what is happening in our brains, is called sunk cost fallacy. It also is an ingredient of planning fallacy, and this example of Parliament, or the example of my date picker. It was discovered in 1980 by Richard Thaler, and it is a tendency for people to continue something they started, be it an endeavor or an option they pursue, an option in which they have invested time, money, or some other resource. And it often happens regardless of the situation. So you start something, you're not that eager to finish it or to just give it up, and you continue it, even though the situation changed. What is happening here is quite complex, but two things would be the most important. So one thing is that humans have a tendency to choose safe decisions to avoid loss, right? Loss is something that we feel really deeply, and it can be financial loss or it can be emotional loss. So sunk cost fallacy is a real bummer in relationships. So if you've been with someone for quite some time, then sometimes it's hard to let go. And the second thing is status quo bias. So we tend to avoid uncertainty. It is even funny because certainty of failure sometimes feels better than the uncertainty of a reward. Think about that. Sometimes it's easier to think, okay, I would fail, than think, okay, I don't know what would happen. What is quite comforting, though, is that 2018 research by Swice suggests that also rats and mice have the same problem. So once they start something and they have made a decision to pursue reward, they can't stop. So what's the idea here behind halo effect and planning fallacy and sunk cost fallacy? The idea is that your brain is a liar. So you're unable to be objective and to assess people properly. you cannot really estimate the time it takes to complete a complex task. As a liar. Look at this. Miller liar illusion, right? Again. So even after you have found out that the lines are equal, and even though I told you what is behind this illusion, you would still perceive one line to be shorter than the other. So we cannot really overcome biases. It's too tiresome for our brains to question everything we see and everything we hear and think. So is there anything to be done? The answer is yes and no. So there are a few things that you can actually try and you can implement in your life. And these are, first and foremost, cognitive fitness. Your brain is an organ. You have to take care of it. How to achieve cognitive fitness? First thing is that you cannot multitask, which is, yeah, super funny because all of us do it and everyone says multitasking is cool. But the truth here is that people cannot multitask. The operational memory that we have to use, our brains have to use, to do two things at the same time is just too short. So when you start one task and your memory is keeping it here and you start doing another thing, then your brain is still in this first thing. So you can only single task, and you should single task not to tire your brain. You should also eat regularly and healthily because your brain needs glucose for neurons to work properly. You should rest. Rest is really important for the brain. You should avoid time pressure. That's interesting. Again, we have a lot of stress at work, and stress opens up or fires neurons in hippocampus that are responsible for emotions, and they close, of course they're not closing, but they turn off, so as to say, neurons that are responsible for cognitive functions. So under stress, you actually cannot think clearly. What is happening, you start basing on emotions. Another thing for cognitive fitness is when you're making a tough decision, just try not to have a lot of stimuli around you, because again, your brain needs to focus, and system 2, to reason and to take decisions and to understand what is happening, needs peace and quiet. Next thing is data. Data is overlooked very, very often, especially statistical data, because it's quite hard to understand and it's quite hard to gather. But still, if you're taking responsible decisions, or if you need to take a responsible decision, the best choice would be to look for data that would support it. You can try to compare your endeavors with other similar ones. You can look at historic data and just try to use it and to make some conclusions basing on it. The third thing is to create checklists, because they help you remember what is to be done, and they help you remember better than you yourself remember. So after some time, when you look on a checklist, actually, it might turn out that your memory changed it, and the initial situation was different. But checklists can help, and also a view from the outside can help. So again, if you're taking a decision or you're thinking about something that's quite complex, or you're planning a complex endeavor, it would be good to talk to someone else, to somebody that has been in a similar situation, or somebody that would simply look at the data you have and at the decision and would tell you, okay, have you thought about that, and this? Three things that you can do. And there's a fourth one, actually. The fourth one is awareness, because awareness can help you most. If you learn how your brain works, and if you learn how much prone it is to mistakes, and how much you yourself are prone to different mistakes, then it would be easier to avoid them. You would be able to think twice, and you'd be able to stop for a second and just ask yourself necessary questions. Do I have data to support it? Is Carol a good person, or is she just good looking, right? So it would help you to stop and would help you to think and use system 2, not base solely on system 1. So there's hope. And there's also hope in research, because in 2019 psychological study, researchers who were conducting it indicated that you can de-bias. You can actually create de-biasing training for people. So if you teach people about different cognitive biases and fallacies, they start seeing them in different contexts and situations. And then they stop and they can think twice. And this 29% that I'm showing you is a number. Let's move back a step. So debiasing can effectively reduce the effects of biases in decision making by 29%. So the more you understand your brain, the better your decisions would be, and also the more clearly you would see the world. And now I have a little thing for you. It would last for a minute, and it would be a clip. And it is quite a famous, it's just quite a famous experiment. So you will get the instructions in the video, and I would shut up for a minute. Let's watch it together, and then we would move to Q&A. So let's play the clip.
Test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla? This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copyrighted. It is available for use in talks, training, and teaching on DVDs from VisCog Productions. Learn more at theinvisiblegorilla.com.
Okay, so you've seen the clip. I hope you've seen the gorilla. So that's the gorilla from the title of my presentation. And what you have seen was quite a famous experiment from the 90s. And I guess the quality of the video just gave you an idea. It was created in the 90s, and it was an experiment on selective attention, which proves that when you totally focus on one thing, like in the video on passing the ball, then your brain really have a problem to see what is going on in the context you are in. So I would leave you with this thought, and I hope that the topic is interesting enough for you to just delve deeper. It's super fun to read about your brain, and it's quite depressing, but then again, the more you know, the better. So thank you, and it's time for Q&A, and if you type anything in the chat, then I'll be able to answer it. You can also drop me a line on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email, and we can discuss that or anything else. Thanks. Okay, so how can I find out more about cognitive biases? You can read about it. You can type it on YouTube. There are many educational videos because that's a topic of interest of many people. So there are many educational videos online that you can watch. There are also many business articles touching the subject of cognitive biases at work. There is a Bible of cognitive functioning, which is called, this is Daniel Kahneman's book, and it is called Thinking Fast and Slow in English. It gives you tons of examples and context. So you can basically learn about biases anywhere, but just watch out because sometimes they are quite simplified. So again, just don't take everything for granted. Just look for the data. If you read an article that cites scientific articles, then the chance is better that it makes sense and it's based in data. Okay, second question. I'm also wondering what factors make one person's brain more prone to cognitive biases than another's. Good question. A couple of things. So you might be more prone to stress, for instance, than somebody else, which means that in a situation when there is pressure, your brain switches to this survival mode faster or quicker than someone else's brain. That's one thing. Also, upbringing. This is quite an interesting factor. If you remember this Miller-Lyer illusion I showed you, the one with arrows, the research was taken in the 80s, as far as I remember. And then it was so popular that other scientists took upon a task to expand on the theory. And it turns out that indigenous nations, I think in South America mainly, but also in Australia, they turned out to be less prone to this illusion. And the scientists think that this is because the initial group was European and American, I think. And we are brought in the environment where there are many rectangulars, and the space is organized in a way that we see these shafts of arrows in places. And indigenous people don't, because nature is not built in this way. So there are a couple of things that are related to how you react to how deep the biases are in your brain. These are just the two of them. So yeah, if you want to learn more, I suggest you read and delve deeper into that. Yes. What about intuition? Wait a second. What about intuition? Is there a link between biases and intuition, or how biased our intuition are, in other words? Yeah, good question. Everything I was telling you about, so all the biases I mentioned, and basically most of biases and fallacies are intuition. So there is this huge sack called intuition, and intuition is that. So intuition is system 1 and system 2, not understanding reality or just simplifying reality. So when you feel that you're making an intuitive assessment or an intuitive choice, it is not intuition that is doing it. It is systems 1, basically, and very often system 2. So intuition is based on experience. That's one thing. So your brain makes fast connections. System 1 is making really fast connections between what you've learned in the past, what you've seen, what you've imagined, and the reality. And then system 2 is adding on top of that. Yeah, so there's no magical thing called intuition. It's just your brain. You just cannot really realize it when it is happening, that it is your brain thinking it and just using data. Right. So there's no reality and there's no intuition. It's bad, isn't it? Okay, there are no more questions on chat, so this is your last chance to type something in. But if not, then thank you. And like I said, you can reach me on LinkedIn and at my McRedo email. And thank you. It was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was fun for you too. Have a good rest of the conference. Bye-bye.